In this episode of Cosmic Sponge, Bigfoot gets expanded sanctuaries in 3 Washington state counties. A UFO resembling a balloon with jet engines is caught on video over Las Vegas. And for our main story, we head over to the Scottish Isles to explore the mystery of the Flannan Lighthouse, involving the disappearance of 3 lightkeepers, with one theory standing out as a favorite among the Cheech and Chong's Special Brownie Club.
Could be MacArthur was like, hey, look, mushrooms. This would be great in the spaghetti sauce.
They were growing right by the ayahuasca bush. I brought some of that in, too.
Welcome to Cosmic Sponge, the podcast where we discuss weird wonders in the world. I'm Stephen Hawk.
And I'm Jimmy Coe.
Tonight, we are looking at a lighthouse.
A mysterious disappearance that makes you poo yourself.
This is the Flannan Lighthouse disappearance, where 3 men go missing without a trace back in the early part of the 20th century. But before we jump into that, Jimmy, what's your week been looking like?
Well, I forgot to hit record one day this week.
Yeah.
I've been riding my one wheel. That's been a lot of fun.
I'm surprised you haven't killed yourself on that yet.
I did take a little bit of a tumble and bust up my foot a little bit, but, you know.
Yeah, well, it's goes with the territory.
Hey, do you know who I'd love to see ride a one wheel? Bigfoot.
Man, though, you would have to get a massive one wheel. I mean, Bigfoot is something like 10 feet tall or something, 9, 10, 12 sometimes.
Yeah, something like that. But
the one wheel would have to be something like 6 feet long. It'd be like a surfboard with a car tire in the middle of it or something.
Nah. He's tall, but his feet are really small. I mean, it's been overstated.
No, dude.
It's been overstated. It's been overstated. You know, they had one guy in their clan who had really big feet.
Yeah.
He was like a quadruple D. And, you know, but, you know, Bigfoot made the news yet again. I know it's hard to believe, but I'm going to ask you a question. What do Whatcom County, Skamania County, and Grays Harbor County all have in common?
I give up, man. I don't know.
Well, due to the diligent work of Miss Andrews' 5th grade class at Lincoln Elementary School in Hoquiam, it's that they all have designations for Sasquatch protection. The school and the students were able to convince the city councils or the county councils, I guess, to designate certain areas of their counties as protected areas for Sasquatch. And they divided their students up into 2 groups. One set of students believed in Sasquatch, and the other set of students didn't believe in Sasquatch. Now, funny enough, it was the students who believed in Sasquatch, some of them, who didn't think it was a good idea to protect them because they were afraid that then the population would explode and you'd have way too many Bigfoots. And they might encroach on the habitat of deer, specifically because some of the boys were worried they'd no longer be able to get hunting tags for deer because deer would become scarce.
Wow, yeah. So they're concerned that there might be an overpopulation of Bigfoots if they were given this protection. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, and that they would encroach on the habitat because you'd have like this explosion of Bigfoots, and then they would eat all of the vegetation, and the deer wouldn't have anything to eat.
Oh,
and then they'd have to go hunting Bigfoot. But then they'd be able to get tags for Bigfoot every year.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. You just open season on Bigfoots.
Yeah, they'd be harder to hunt.
Yeah.
They're impossible to shoot as it is.
Impossible to actually see in many regards, I guess.
I don't know anybody who's bagged a Bigfoot yet.
No, apparently not. If they have, they've kept it secret from the world. That's for sure. Well, congratulations to all those school children out there that now have a protected Bigfoot zone.
Yeah, well done, guys.
Did you see this UFO over Las Vegas? I think this was back on the 18th of April, 2022. See that video?
No, I didn't, but it doesn't surprise me. Las Vegas, gambling, city of sin. You know what stays in Vegas? What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So, I mean, I'm surprised we even got an image of it.
Yeah, this didn't stay in Vegas. So the eyewitness was in her car when she heard what sounded like a jet. She got out her phone and opened her window just in time to film an odd saucer-shaped object pass right overhead. The craft doesn't look like any typical plane, but it should be noted that Area 51 is not far away. It's a well-known rumor that at the infamous location, the Air Force works on experimental aircraft. Some people think that it's actually a testing ground for alien technology.
No.
So yeah, the video is very, very brief, but it's weird. You know, I posted this story, listeners, on Facebook. So, you know, jump on there and check it out. Look for Cosmic Sponge on Facebook and you'll find this story along with some others.
It looks like a balloon.
I think it's a temperature inversion.
It's a temperature version that sounds like a jet.
Yeah, no, it does sound like a jet. I mean, she said it sounded like a jet. I don't know. It's hard to make it out, but it's very strange looking, I think.
Looks like a party balloon.
Well, it's out of focus for one thing, too.
Yeah, she's not going to get a call from Spielberg anytime soon, for sure.
Yeah. Anyway, it's out there. Take a look at it, listeners, if you want to check it out.
Yeah, you know, I would love for somebody in Hollywood who's like a professional operator of cameras to actually capture one of these. You know, like Conrad Hall gets a picture of a UFO, because then we'd be able to see it.
Everyone would say it was a hoax, especially if a filmmaker did capture it. They would say, well, he's just using some kind of Hollywood special effects. That's the only reason that it looks so good. You don't think?
Well, yeah, you always have some of those knuckleheads, but I mean, you can put it inside of a computer program and see whether or not it's been modified or adjusted, CGI added. I mean, you can tell that stuff, right?
Yeah, maybe. That would be cool, though. All right, well, let's move on to tonight's main topic. But before we get into that, I would like to remind everyone to please rate and review the podcast. It helps other people find the show. Check out our webpage, cosmicsponge.com. There you can find the web store and some other fun things. Also, if you'd like to support the show, there's an icon in the upper right-hand corner called Buy Me a Coffee. It looks like a little coffee cup. Right beside that, there is another link that will take you to Patreon. So if you would like to become a patron, if you become a patron right now, we now have a new show called Weird Wonders. We have a few episodes in the can, and we record that exclusively for our Patreon patrons. And there's a few other benefits to the program as well, but the main thing is you'd be helping out the show. And if you do that, we'd really appreciate it. But if not, that's fine too. Just glad everybody's tuning in and listening to us ramble about UFOs every week and other weird wonders in the world. And also, don't forget to check us out on Instagram. On to tonight's show. Jimmy, I know you've done a little bit of legwork on this one, and I know that because I heard it last night, but
somebody didn't press the record button. Tonight, we have a lighthearted mystery from the Scottish Isles to warm your heart and tickle your funny bone. Let's begin. The stacked bodies burned beneath the full moon on Elaine Moor. Nearby on the Isle of Lewis, the standing stones of Callanish stood tall, a witness to the pagan flames reaching skyward, growing ever brighter as they consumed human flesh. Spiteful mermaids swam the shallows of the isles, avoiding the sea serpent, seeking easy prey, while fairies danced feverishly, entertained by the wails of the spirits of their past victims, lured to watery graves among the jagged reefs plagued by stormy seas. Centuries passed, and an uneasy calm settled over the Flannan Isles. In time, the technology of mankind advanced, and with it came amazing inventions such as underwear, dog vests, drinking straws, and, pertinent to this story, an architectural boom in lighthouse construction industry which favored remote, haunted islands. It was here that George Lawson erected the Flannan Isle Lighthouse, and which one Joseph Moore, occasional lighthouse keeper, found himself on Boxing Day in the year of our Lord 1900, a day where he should have been punching patrons at the local pub as a consequence of bad Christmas gift-giving, rather than on a rowboat as the relief lighthouse keeper for a cursed venue. At least that's what I thought Boxing Day was until I was informed by my buddy's wife, who is a native of Bristol in southwest England who informed me that it was a holiday originally intended to hand out gifts to the needy, but had in recent times embraced consumerism and now is a shopping holiday, which was essentially boxing for good deals at England's Walmart equivalent on what amounts to our Black Friday.
O'Malley's Mart.
O'Malley's Mart.
Is that what they call it over there?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you got that right. Go down and have a Boxing Day at O'Malley's Mart.
Yeah, I think the idea of boxing is you're putting it in the boxes, right? Boxing Day.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with my idea of a bunch of Brits getting out their fist and punching each other. Back to our story. Upon reaching the lighthouse, Joseph called out and received no response from within. The doors to the lighthouse were secure and when opened revealed an overturned chair, a partially eaten meal on the dining table. All the clocks had stopped, indicating something had likely happened a week prior. The logbooks would recount a harrowing storm, causing one of the seasoned lightkeepers to break down in a fit of hysteria. A single oilskin hung on a peg by the door, and the beds were unmade. No doubt this story contained all the source material one would need for a Gordon Lightfoot hit single, but for the poor rhyming options available for the word Flannan. There is more to this tale, however, and while the fate of the men remains a mystery, enough evidence exists to point to one of several theories put forth since that fateful December in 1900. Today we will present the facts of this story and prevailing theories and leave it to you, the listener, to decide what became of the missing lightkeepers of the Flannan Owl Lighthouse.
Well, all I can say about that is I think that Flannan would be much easier to come up with some rhymes than Fitzgerald. You know, cannon, look at what they're planning. You know.
Really, people don't talk like that. Look at what they're planning.
Well, I mean, you do if you're doing a song or something, right? Or a poem, a ballad.
A ballad, as it were. A Gordon Lightfoot ballad.
Yeah, man. So, yeah, right. Let's look at this. So what we're talking about, of course, is these three men were put out at the lighthouse. They were the crew of this lighthouse. It was a modern lighthouse in its day. On this isle, one night, a ship was passing by. Noticed the light was out. Then whenever they went to explore the island to find out what was going on, they were getting no signals from the island. Some people went over there to look for him, and all three crew members were missing, never to be seen again.
So I think maybe we should go back to the beginning and just step through this chronologically, and we're going to start with the lighthouse itself. It had been built over the course of like 4 or 5 years, starting in the the 1890s. Yeah, 1894, 95. And it opened in 1900. And these lighthouse keepers were the first lighthouse keepers on the island, along with one lighthouse keeper who, because he became sick, was replaced by Donald MacArthur. The original lighthouse keeper, his name was Ross. He had been injured on the island before, earlier in 1900, injured by the tram. Now, there was a tram on the island that was utilized to bring things up from the cliff facing where the supply ships would be, all the way up a 100-foot-plus cliff face to the lighthouse itself.
Yeah, it was like 160 steps from the landing where the ships would dock and drop off these supplies all the way to the top of this outcropping where the lighthouse was. Yeah, you wouldn't want to hand carry all that stuff up there.
Yeah, considering how heavy a lot of these crates were filled with provisions and other items that they would have to switch out every 3 or 4 weeks. Later in 1900, Ross actually fell ill and had to be replaced by a new lighthouse keeper, and that would be Donald MacArthur, who previously was a soldier and then turned to lighthouse keeping because he had a short temper and was apparently not very good at aiming or something like that. I don't know what the details of his horrible soldiering career and how it went awry, but anyway, Donald MacArthur replaced, I think his name was William Ross.
He was known as the Occasional.
Yeah, that's weird. They talk weird in the old days. They call him the Occasional. And so there was James Ducat, or Ducat, or Ducat. I don't know what I think a Ducat is the pronunciation that I saw in the guide, but it's spelled Ducat, or Ducat. And then there was Thomas Marshall and Donald MacArthur. And then there was a fourth man that was cycled in every 3 or 4 weeks, and his name was Joseph Moore. So Joseph Moore was stationed on the Isle of Lewis. The rest of the men were on the island with the lighthouse when this incident occurred. It really starts on December 7th, I think is probably the earliest part that most people start the story. The reason we start in December 7th is just to get an idea of how things normally worked for the lighthouse. On the Isle of Lewis, the lighthouse board had hired a civilian to keep a watch on the lighthouse because they didn't have telegrams or phones or anything at night at that time from the island to the mainland. The way that they communicated was through 2 flagpoles. One was the main flagpole, and then there was another smaller pole that was on the balcony of the lighthouse. The main flagpole, you would just raise up different flags to indicate the status of the lighthouse and its crew. And then to get more specific details about things that might be going on, they had disc I wasn't able to find details about what the disc would tell the observer on Lewis Island, but they'd have disc, and depending on the number of discs that they would put on the flagpole on the balcony, that would indicate some additional information. And that way, if they had a problem or, there was some injury or serious incident on the island, they would be able to communicate that through these flagpoles.
Yeah, sort of like the bat signal in a way.
It was exactly like the bat signal, but nothing like it.
Oh, okay.
Because there was no light in the sky shining on the crowds with a bat signal thing.
Oh, you said they shine a light over toward the village or whatever. It's kind of like it.
No, it's not light. Did I say light? No, they had a telescope so they could see from Lewis
the
Island.
Village from Lewis Island, where the main settlement was, they could look through the lighthouse and just look at some.
Well, it was actually a guy in a house on the edge of Lewis Island. His name was Robert McKenzie, just a civilian that they hired, and they gave him this telescope so he could observe the lighthouse and take notes. And then if anything happened, then he would contact the main base on Lewis Island and say, hey, look, the lighthouse guys, they got a thing, they got a flag up saying that they got the poops and they need some relief really, really quickly because, back
or need some new light bulbs or whatever.
Right. Because if you had diarrhea back in those days, you die. Right. So it was serious.
Right.
So Robert McKenzie, on December 7th, he observes the light is on and everything looks fine. And then from the 7th to the 12th, he isn't able to see the light, but that's not unusual because I guess the fog gets so thick and the distance was so great, sometimes it was obscured. So he didn't notice the light again till the 12th. So it wasn't unusual for some amount of time to go between observing the lighthouse where you wouldn't be able to see anything and it wouldn't raise any alarm bells.
Yeah, well, it says here various ships had reported passing the lighthouse on December 7th and 12th with nothing out of the ordinary to report. So I'm assuming the lighthouse was functioning.
Exactly. It's not until the 15th of December that a ship passing by the Arctur? Arctur. It was a cargo ship, the Arctur. It had been damaged in rough seas, and it noted that the lighthouse was not operating. Now, I don't know if it was damaged as a result of that lighthouse not operating or if it was some other reef somewhere else in those isles. But nonetheless, it made a note that the lighthouse should have been operating given the condition of the seas, but it wasn't operating. It gets back to port in the island of Lewis. That's when they decide that they're going to send the supply ship back out, the Hesperus. Now, December 20th was when it was normally supposed to go out, so they were just going to go out on the 20th with Joseph Moore. So it still wasn't considered, no alarms were really going off still at this point in time. December 20th comes along, and there's inclement weather, such that the Hesperus doesn't make the trip. It's not until December 26th, and that's Boxing Day, that the Hesperus makes the trip over to the lighthouse. As they approach the lighthouse, the captain shoots off a flare because they don't see anybody out on the landings or at the lighthouse. There's no indication anyone's there, so they shoot off a flare. Still nobody shows their faces, and they sound their horn. Still nothing. Joseph Moore gets in a rowboat and rows over by himself as part of the relief. He gets to the landing. None of the provisional boxes that need resupplied are out like they should be. He goes up to the lighthouse, and the lighthouse is normal looking. The doors are shut. He opens up. He calls out, nobody there. He looks around and he notes several things about the lighthouse. Now, in some of the stories we originally looked at that give you this idea of mystery, that something had suddenly gone awry, wasn't true. His notes say that when he got there, all of the dinnerware was put away. There was a slate that they used to record their daily task that they would have to do and get done. It looked in order and looked pretty mundane. The main logbook, where the information for the slate at the end of the day was then transferred over to the logbook, was in order and nothing unusual in that. The beds were made. There was nothing left out on the table. There's no meal on the table. There were no chairs kicked over. The one unusual thing was that the inclement weather gear for two of the men, and that would be for Ducat and Marshall, was missing. But the oilskin for Donald MacArthur was still hanging on a peg. Now, oilskin, I didn't know what that was. Do you know what that is, Steve?
Some type of weather gear, all weather gear, I guess, or rain gear, right?
Yeah. It's like, you ever see those cartoons with that stupid little bear that wears that lighthouse keeper raincoat, the yellow raincoat with the yellow hat?
Yeah.
There's some British bear in a cartoon that wears it. They usually had linseed oil or some other water repelling stuff on the outside of it, and then it would be heavy cotton or something like that to keep them warm.
Okay.
And it was hanging there. So MacArthur, wherever he was, because he was missing, was without his heavy weather gear.
And that would have been strange in itself, right? Because this is December 15th off the coast of Scotland. So it's cold. If he'd went outside, or it would have most likely been just in short sleeves.
Yeah, and at that time in that year, the sun set around 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
All of the clocks in the lighthouse had stopped. So they needed to be wound regularly in order to keep running. And based on the time that they had stopped, they surmised that it was about the week prior, sometime in that week prior, that those clocks had stopped. So given that the last log entries on the slate were for December 15th and the clocks stopped ticking around that time too, they sort of assumed that it was December the 15th where something terrible had happened. So Moore is in here. He observes all of this information, communicates back to the ship. So the captain of the ship sends more men over to the island to support Joseph Moore. And then he radios back to the lighthouse board and the superintendent to let them know what's going on. And this is what he says.
A dreadful accident has happened at Flannan's. The 3 keepers, Ducat, Marshall, and the Occasional, have disappeared from the island. On our arrival there this afternoon, no sign of life was to be seen on the island. Fired a rocket, but, as no response was made, managed to land Moore, who went up to the station but found no keepers there. The clocks were stopped, and other signs indicated that the accident must have happened about a week ago. Poor fellows must have been blown over the cliffs or drowned trying to secure a crane, or something like that. Night coming on. We could not wait to make something as to their fate. I have left Moore, MacDonald, buoy master, and 2 seamen on the island to keep the light burning until you make other arrangements. We'll not return to Oban until I hear from you. I have repeated this wire to Muirhead in case you are not at home. I will remain at the telegraph office until it closes, if you wish to wire me.
And that is the letter from the captain of the Hesperus to the main office.
Now, wasn't there some examination? I have here that there were some strange log entries. Or do you want to go ahead and discuss what they found down the boat landing first?
Right. So when the additional men, buoy master, I love that name, the 2 seamen who remain unnamed and just referred to as the 2 seamen, how insulting is that? And then, of course, Moore and this other fellow, MacDonald, they all go over, and the day after Moore lands on the island and notice no one is there, they actually start scouring the entire island to try to ascertain if the men are still somewhere on the island, injured or maybe having a little camp out or something. They go looking for them, can't find them anywhere. So there's 2 landings for the island. One's on the eastern side and one's on the western side. So they check out the eastern side and everything seems in order. Nothing is disturbed, nothing's out of order. But when they go to the western side, they notice quite a lot of damage. First of all, there's the landing where the tram terminus is. And there they find a 1-ton boulder that had been dislodged from higher up on the island and rolled down and landed there on that concrete pad. The iron railing around the pad and some of the stairs going down had been damaged and broken off. And there was a big box of tackle or wire, or rope rather, that had been dislodged and swept away, presumably. Now, this is about 110 feet up from the base of the cliff. I don't know how you do it, but somehow a wave reached 110 feet up, presumably, took out the boulder and washed the men away. At least this was the theory that Joseph Moore rested on after observing the western landing.
Yeah, and so that's odd in itself. I mean, when we look at this, so there's three able-bodied men. They're nowhere to be found. Everything looks to be in order, except that MacArthur's oilskins or his, outdoor gear is still hanging on the peg. But I know all the gates were closed. There's nothing out of whack. They go down there and they see this damage where this big boulders on that landing, all the ropes and everything's in a disarray. So it's just a huge mystery what happened to these men. I mean, why all three of them at the same time? For one thing, it was against the rules or maybe even illegal for the lighthouse itself to remain unattended. In other words, all three men wouldn't have been out doing the same activity if it was outside the lighthouse because someone had to be there in that lighthouse at all times.
Right. They would have been scolded severely.
And then there's the question of the logs. Now, there were some odd log entries I ran across this. So all this happened. They surmised that the men probably disappeared on the 15th because that's when the ship, the Arctur, or on or before the 15th, because the Arctur, the ship that noticed the light was out, had passed by on the night of December 15th. But here we go with the strange log entry. The first one says December 12th, gale north by northwest, sea lashed to fury, never seen such a storm. Waves very high, tearing at lighthouse. Everything ship-shape, James Ducat, irritable. Following later that day, storm still raging, wind steady, storm-bound, cannot go out. Ship passing, sounding foghorn, could see lights of cabins. Ducat, quiet. Donald MacArthur, crying.
Yeah, a hardened
the boxer,
soldier.
Right? The ex-soldier.
The boxer. The man with the walrus mustache.
Yeah, you gotta admit, man, the facial hair in those days was pretty remarkable, man. I want to bring those days back.
Oh, me too.
Mutton
chops, the handlebar mustache. Man. Heck yeah.
Next day, December 13th, storm continued through the night. Wind shifted west by north. Ducat quiet. MacArthur praying. Followed by later the same day, noon, gray daylight. Me, Ducat, MacArthur prayed. On December 14th, no entry was made in the log, and on December 15th, the final entry was made, which read only, December 15th, 1 p.m., storm ended, sea calm, God is over all.
I mean, the warning bells go up immediately because prayed? I don't know. Because everybody knows MacArthur was Hindu. I don't think he...
No, he was.
He looks it with that walrus mustache. And another thing we left out here was that the light itself was in good working order, was well maintained, and still had fuel. It just wasn't lit.
Yeah, very strange. So that's baffling. And the main thing is, as you had pointed out, this is an official log. It's not the diary of the lighthouse keeper. I mean, he wouldn't write these kind of little details such as James Ducat irritable or Donald MacArthur crying, Ducat quiet, and things like that. You just wouldn't put that in the log unless it had some bearing on the operation of the lighthouse. I mean, the log is to talk about what you've done that day, totally strictly business. It doesn't have anything to do with like personal feelings and it just would have been very out of character for something like that, or just very, very unusual for something like that to be in the logbooks.
You wouldn't have stuff like, Ducat, I'm pretty sure, stole my chocolates earlier this evening.
Right.
I'm feeling a little sensitive and overwhelmed by the situation. I think I will take a little bit of a bubble bath.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you wouldn't want to put anything like that in there.
Yeah. And the lighthouse keepers wouldn't put anything like that in there. Not even that stuff that, theoretically they put in there. You wouldn't see that from lighthouse keepers were tough men. These are men who, cuddled in lighthouses at the edge of the world where sea monsters exist and storms raged, and you slept on splintered boards and ate.
Well, you're just the life of isolation.
Ate stale bread and old cheese.
Yeah. Have you ever seen that movie, The Lighthouse? Now, I know there's a movie made about this, and I've never seen it, but there's a movie with Willem Dafoe. Came out a couple of years ago. It's in black and white.
Oh, I got to see it. I love Dafoe.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Yeah, it's neat about two men living on this lighthouse, but it's got some real strange others. I mean, it's really weird, but it's really cool, I think, but very strange.
I have to see that. So
yeah.
So really, the question is, were these logbook entries real? Where did they come from?
Well, and then I guess one thing we should mention is the story, of course, was a big story. I mean, just that the three men disappeared altogether is no answer. I mean, a major mystery here. So what really added to the aura of this whole story, this whole disappearance, was a ballad that was published known as Flannan Isle by Wilfred Wilson Gibson. And it refers to this mysterious incident. And this added this aura of mystery to the whole incident, right? Here's some of the stanzas. Would you like to hear some of the stanzas?
Oh, I can't wait. I'm on the edge of my seat.
And I'll spare you everything, but just a few of the stanzas here that kind of stick out to me. So, though three men dwell on Flannan Isle to keep the lamp alight, as we steered under the lee, we caught no glimmer through the night. A passing ship at dawn had brought the news, and quickly we set sail to find out what strange thing might ail the keepers of the deep sea light. And that was stanzas 1 and 2. So they get to the isle, and then as they go into the lighthouse itself, here we go. Yet as we crowded through the door, we only saw a table spread for dinner, meat, cheese, and bread, but all untouched and no one there, as though when we sat down to eat, ere we could even taste, alarm had come, and they in haste had ridden and left the bread and meat, for at the table head a chair lay tumbled on the floor. And then the final one I would like to recite is, we seemed to stand for an endless while, though still no word was said, three men alive on Flannan Isle who thought on three men dead.
Yeah, that's, and that's what conflated with the logbook entries, because, I mean.
Right. The logbook entries were part of this poem, right? And it turns out later that those were all a fabrication. In this poem itself, just to add the mystery, for instance, when he says, they saw the table spread with all the food, all of it untouched, and the chair being overturned, as if they were all sitting down to eat and something happened and they all jumped up and ran out. That actually is not how the place was found at all. He, in fact, notes, the Moore does, who does the initial investigation of the island, notes that all of the cutlery was cleaned and put away and that nothing was out of order. Nothing at all was out of order. It's just the men were missing. The only thing that seemed out of place was that boulder and all the ropes still hanging loose from the crane, that some mishap may have occurred.
Yeah, but you have to admit that the logbook entry thing is more enjoyable because, those original logbook entries, I mean, if you had a voiceover actor doing it, it would be like, on the one hand, it would be like,
made my bed, cleaned the silverware, replaced the toilet paper in the outhouse, refueled the light, turned on the light, turned off the light.
I mean, that's boring, and that's probably what was in the logbooks. It sounds much better. It says, something like,
the cat is uneasy because there's a storm unlike any you've ever seen before outside, and I can hear the mermaids down there and the sea serpents outside, and there's some crazy man out on the island with lightning coming down, and I'm crying at the...
Yeah, that kind of stuff is way more interesting.
Yeah, much more dramatic. Exactly. So that there is that adds that. But regardless of all those things, I mean, that is a strange mystery. These three men disappeared and that really happened. But there was a little bit of embellishment with the poem and in some other versions of the story. So let's look at what could have caused this disappearance. What are some of the speculations that are out there?
There are two that are thought to be very reasonable explanations, down-to-earth explanations. But before we get to them, let's go to the ones that are perhaps a bit more outlandish. First, eaten by sea monster. The owls have a history.
Maybe Zeus released the Kraken.
Release the Kraken.
I mean, I could see it, right? For instance, the first two men, they're in their oilskins. They're working on the crane. And MacArthur, he's inside the lighthouse where he's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
But then he sees the Kraken coming, all the tentacles and stuff flailing.
It's like in the movies
air.
where you see the water bubbling and it's like moving, like something's under moving.
And he sees it, and then maybe hears a man scream or something like that. So he runs out without his oilskins.
But he's got a harpoon in his hands.
Yeah, exactly. He grabs it off the wall.
Yeah.
You know,
dips a little oil in the tip,
there.
Lights it, and he's running down there as fast as he can.
But by the time he gets down there, both men are already in some tentacles. Maybe one's getting a head bit off or something, and they're yelling, "MacArthur, no!" And then MacArthur goes up to it, ready to throw the harpoon, but then a tentacle comes up behind him and curls around and just pulls him under, and then they're all gone.
And just like that.
I mean, I could see it.
I could see it as if I wrote that movie myself.
So
the problem with that theory is that we've never ever seen a Kraken.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah. I'm not buying the sea monster thing. Could be the Loch Ness monster, but no one's ever seen it either. I mean, they've claimed to have seen, things that turned out to be seals going in a group together, or a tree branch or something like that.
Well, I mean, on the other hand, if there had been sightings of some type of sea serpent around Lewis Isle,
it
perhaps
lend more credibility.
There could have been a little more credence to that, or let's say sightings of flying saucers or something, or lights in the sky. There's no indication that there was any kind of paranormal thing going on, I don't think.
Right. We're not going to talk about UFO abductions because no one's brought that one up, but we will talk about normal abductions. And this was one of the possible theories that have been proposed for the disappearance of the lighthouse keepers, is that they were abducted by, let's say, pirates.
Pirates,
or maybe somebody in the, Shanghai business.
Yeah, yep. Could have been, what do you call that? Whenever they force someone to...
Isn't that Shanghai or something like that?
Yeah, well, it's Shanghai, yes, it's kind of the slang thing. Yeah, I'm trying to think of the actual word for it. Shanghai.
They were...
Force someone to join a ship lacking a full crew.
They were encouraged to join by gunpoint.
Well, there's a word for it, like whenever the Royal Navy literally would do this. I mean, that's one thing that we went to the War of 1812 was started because the Royal Navy, they would grab up American sailors and force them into the Royal Navy. That's no joke. We got tired of it. We're like, hey, man, stop picking on our American sailors here.
Now,
press gang, that's it. Press gang. The idea of Shanghai, I think, became just because it was an exotic port, like Shanghai. Like they would be at at a neutral port. In other words, there's the Royal Navy, there's the American Navy, and of course, a lot of the Royal Navy would say, "Hey, they're still English citizens. They didn't maybe buy the whole independence thing, right? Especially in 1812."
Yeah, they didn't recognize that document.
Anyway, but yeah, I mean, I guess possible, but.
They took no other belongings, right? They took nothing else. No other supplies were missing. I mean, you're going to leave.
Didn't take anything, and then there was no ransom or anything like that either.
Yeah, I'm not buying it.
Yeah, it wouldn't have lasted forever. At least probably one of the men or more would have escaped at some point, got word out to their families.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that could happen.
How about this? Murder.
Well, I think that's possible. This idea I thought about, if let's say MacArthur, who was known to have a bad temper and was an ex-soldier. Now we don't know why he was no longer in the military, but he just mustered out or whatever. But think about this: he's got a bad temper.
He's been drinking from the mercury water that the light is resting in.
Could be. Maybe Ducat took the last cupcake, got the last Little Debbie out of the cabinet. Something like that. It was the final straw.
Yeah, provisions weren't coming for another couple of weeks.
Right. The provisions weren't scheduled until the 26th. That's 11 days without a cupcake.
And he clearly wrote his name on that cupcake.
Yeah, exactly. And so when they're down there working on the dangerous cliffs, he goes down there and just helps them along.
Yeah, I mean,
to fall into the water.
he goes for his cupcake. It's not there. He knows it's Ducat because he saw the crumbs on his walrus mustache. So he's like,
saw the cream filling.
Saw that cream filling. He wasn't sure what it was. Now he knows. So it's like,
right. And he ran out. So he was pissed, right? He was drinking. He ran out without his oiled skins on.
Yeah.
He's all crazy. Probably ripped his shirt off too.
Yeah, he's seeing red. That's all he sees.
Yeah.
And he goes down there, and Ducat tries to stop him. Marshall tries to stop him, but he's having none of it. And he picks him up over his head, throws him off the edge of the cliff. Maybe the next guy is able to hold on to him, and they both go over the railing.
Yep. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Murder,
That's
suicide.
very possible, though.
Yeah, we'll keep that one on the list. Yeah, possible. Could be.
Yeah.
So let's get to the two main ones that the Lighthouse board settled on as the explanation for the missing men. Two possibilities, and they're given sort of equal weight for the most part. They officially recorded it as they were swept away to sea by a wave.
Right, like a rogue wave or something. Although, it would have had to have been pretty high, the wave itself.
Right, so they were presumably, if they were on that landing, they were 110 feet up. And at 110 feet up, we only have rogue waves measured at 20 feet, 20 meters rather, which is like 65 feet, give or take. We've never seen a rogue wave like that. It's not like it's not possible, but unlikely, probably, to have a rogue wave that big. Maybe. I don't know. And the boulder that was dislodged, presumably by water as well, was higher up on the island than that 110 feet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this would have had to been an enormous wave.
Seems like it would have been recorded in other places.
Right.
If that would have happened, like on Lewis Island itself.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not buying the wave. I'm really not. But the second one is wind. Now, I didn't know this, but when I went and did my research, the wind on the island, Elaine Moore, got so bad that it's been known to throw men to the ground as well as pick them up off the ground. The winds recorded for that day were westwardly earlier in the day on December 15th on the slate.
So it would have blown them out to sea.
Yeah.
And if you hit that water, this is the middle of December in the North Atlantic, hypothermia would set in very quickly. Your muscles start seizing up when you get that cold. You can't swim. Regardless of how they hit the water, if indeed they did hit the water, they could have gone down or would have went down pretty quickly. I mean, the fact that no bodies were found is not a big surprise. If you get rough seas, could have carried them anywhere.
Yeah, that's assuming they survived that 100-foot fall.
Right, that's true too.
Yeah.
And then I'm wondering if it wasn't some type of mishap. I mean, obviously there was something going on with the boulder on the platform, the ropes all out of whack. Like they were probably working on their landing. My guess is that MacArthur went to look for them eventually because they were gone so long and didn't hear anything. Even though he wasn't supposed to leave his post, then he went down to try and help or something like that, or investigate him, and something happened to him too.
Yeah, slipped on a bar of soap or something at the edge of the cliff. And over
right,
he went.
And went down in the water. And he didn't even have his oilskins on, so he wouldn't have lasted long, I wouldn't think.
Right.
So definitely a big mystery.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth noting, Elon Moore was named after Flannan Mac, who was an Irish saint who lived in the 7th century and was the son of an Irish chieftain, Turlo of Thomond. He was a pilgrim, went to Rome, where Pope John IV consecrated him as a bishop. He built a chapel on the island, and in death, he was said to regard Eileen Moore as his own. For centuries, shepherds used to bring over sheep to the island to graze, but they would never stay the night, fearful of spirits believed to haunt it. A sinister, watchful presence was said to reside there. Although the island seemed to be a perfect place to establish a congregation, the worshippers believed in the island's supernatural powers. It was a place that many still believe was a place of fairies. Because of its reputation and the superstitions surrounding it, rituals such as circling the church on your knees were adopted by the locals. It was said that there was a definite presence of an aura that undeniably shrouded the isle. And people still talk about it. They say even the lighthouse keepers after these three men talked about an oppressive kind of feeling on the island.
There's a lot of weird stuff that went on, like when they were constructing the lighthouse, one of the men died. The clerk of works died, presumably from natural causes, but we can't be sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, that leads some people to believe that maybe the three men disappeared because of some kind of
Evil spirit.
evil spirits. Right. Exactly. I mean, you know what we really need is an Indian burial ground on there too. That would just top it right off. Right.
And a housing development.
Yeah. So I guess the only way to really find out what happened to these men, I did some research, and there is some definite answers to what happened.
Right, but before we do that, let's just do a couple of more bullet points.
Okay.
Bullet points about what went on. So I mentioned that this the clerk of works died during the construction of the lighthouse. He wasn't the only death. Billy died also.
The horse?
The horse Billy died. He was slung ashore by a crane, but he became agitated, struggled out of the harness, and fell to his death to the sea below.
See, that's strange. That's like the opening scene of the horror movie, you know?
Yeah, you can hear that weird music coming on and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
as they're building the lighthouse, you know, the horse flips out or it sees something.
So 1 year later, remember William Ross? He was the lighthouse keeper that became ill and had to be replaced by Donald MacArthur.
Yeah.
He died a year after at another lighthouse.
Weird.
And then
maybe it's cursed.
Yeah. And now in 1904, another lighthouse keeper at that same lighthouse on the Flannan Isles, his name was John McLaughlin. He fell from the lighthouse tower and died.
Dang.
Yeah. And let's see. What else we got here? The Arcton that first reported the light being out on the island. It was lost at sea in 1912, all hands gone.
Was it in the Bermuda Triangle?
It was in the Bermuda Scottish Triangle, I think.
The North Atlantic Triangle.
The North Atlantic Triangle.
Yeah.
So in 1970,
that's strange.
Yeah, in 1971, the lighthouse was automated, so no more deaths on the island after 1971.
Oh, yeah, good thing, man. You know.
Yeah, for sure. But
yeah, so you know, so for all these years, 120 years, we've been wondering what has happened to those three men, and luckily for us, someone reached out to a couple of psychics to get a vision of it. We can now bring you from Cosmic Sponge the true answers to the disappearance at the Flannan Lighthouse.
It's on a website called Schrodinger'sOtherCat.com. Now, I figure each of us would read one of the psychics. So you want to read Psychic 1 or Psychic 2?
Yeah, go ahead, man. You knock it out there, whichever one you want.
Okay, I'm going to read Psychic 1.
Okay.
Eerie. The weather is calm. Guys out of their minds mad, sweating, hallucinating like something is chasing them. They jump off the cliff into the water and died. The land is cursed? Something underneath is dark, energetically wrong. Some negative force radiates out and causes people to go crazy. Hallucinations, fear, panic, anything negative, like water dripping. It starts small, then escalates into something huge in the mind.
All right, hold on.
I can't wait to hear your voice. That's how I imagine a psychic talks.
No, all right, yeah, that's pretty good. So let's see. Let me get to psychic number 2. The reaction is, I see someone being chased by bees, only there's no bees. It's all in their mind. They're waving at nothing, running, terrified. Some kind of dark energy from below is making them crazy. They jump into the water. Gone. I think we're on to something here, though. I mean, look at this, okay? 2 independent psychics. Your psychic says, they're flipping out, right? Weather's calm, but the guy's out of their mind, mad, sweating, hallucinating. Something is chasing them. Let's go to psychic number 2 says, I see someone being chased by bees, only there are no bees. All right. And then we go to, they jumped off the cliff into the water and died. The last line of psychic 2 is they jump into the water, gone. The land is cursed, is your psychic. Something underneath is dark, energetically wrong. Psychic 2 says some kind of dark energy from below is making them crazy. So, right? I mean, what do you think? I would think they nailed it, man.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, you know,
it could have been that something they ate. I mean, it could be marshals be like, "Hey guys, guess what I found? You know that smell, that weird smell? I found the source of it. It's a bunch of dead birds over by a berry bush. But I picked all the berries and I brought them back for dinner."
Could be MacArthur was like, "Hey, look, mushrooms. This would be great in the spaghetti sauce."
They were growing right by the ayahuasca bush. I brought some of that in too.
All right, man. Well, who knows? The truth is that is a mystery, and those 3 men did go missing. You know, maybe solved by Psychic 1 and 2, but I don't think that is going to satisfy mainstream science into solving this mystery. So, but anyway, that's it. That's the mystery of the Flannan Lighthouse.
Right. And if you would, you can go to our YouTube channel or our website and just leave a comment or leave a comment on, our podcast
Facebook.
site. Or, Facebook's a good place, a great place, actually. Facebook, go there. Leave a comment on what you think happened to these 3 men.
Yeah, email the show. What do you think happened to the 3 men at the lighthouse? Maybe we missed something. So let us know. First contact at cosmicsponge.com.
Yeah, can't wait to get
all
some
right.
of the...
Jimmy, yeah, you got anything else for this one?
Nope, I'm good, man.
All right. Well, let's get on out of here. This is Stephen Hawk signing out, and we'll see you next week.
Jimmy Coe, keep your eyes to the skies and your feet on the ground. We'll see you next week.
I still think being chased by bees, but there are no bees. I mean,
they're imaginary.
It's pretty
bees.
Mysterious. I don't know, man.
I like your mushroom idea there. It's like, hey, I picked these mushrooms. The sheep that we're eating seem fine. I mean, they're running around in circles, and some of them jumped off the cliff. But other than that, they seem fine.
They seem fine. They're stupid sheep.
They're stupid sheep.
What do you expect?
I've been eating them all day, and I feel fine. Why is your head big and shaped like an elephant?
All right, man. I'll see you next time.
Sounds good. Night, dude. That's all for this week's episode of Cosmic Sponge. Please don't forget to rate and review us wherever you listen. It helps others find the show. If you have any questions or have a story you'd like to share, you can contact us using our email account at firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. If you'd like to support the show, consider becoming a Patreon at patreon.com/cosmicsponge, where you get access to exclusive content, including our Weird Wonders, news, and stories released every week. To explore everything Cosmic Sponge has to offer, including other ways to support the show, head on over to our website at www.cosmicsponge.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.